All right, we're gonna try it again. Hey, how you doing? So I am back this week with a video that I'm actually pretty excited about. As most of you have figured out, I am cheap, and I think a lot of you are in the same boat as I am. Maybe not cheap, maybe thrifty. How's that? And I've also had a few folks ask if I'm going to show any more leatherwork stuff. So I've decided to combine being thrifty and leatherwork all in the same video. While looking through my Pinterest board of things to make in hopes of finding some sort of inspiration for this video, I ran across a belt that I wanted to try to recreate. And while that belt is no longer available, it took me down a rabbit hole of all of the horribly expensive accessories that you can find on Anthropologie. So what I've decided to do is to pick a couple of those accessories and recreate them for a whole lot less than what they have it listed for. So I have picked 3 pieces from Anthropologie. I have picked 2 belts and a bag. The order in which I do these will go from easiest to perhaps the most difficult, so that if you are interested in getting started with leatherwork, you have somewhere to start from and maybe something to aspire to. Of the 3 pieces, the first is perhaps the easiest, but also it's one of the most expensive belts that they have on their website. I don't know how in the world they think it's okay to charge $150 for this belt, but we're gonna make it for a fraction of the cost, an absolute fraction. The second belt looks to be a little bit more complicated, but it's still doable for just about everybody. And then the bag itself is not too difficult once you've learned a few skills. So I have to leave in a little over an hour because I am going to play hockey for the first time in a couple of years. I put a poll out just to see if you guys could figure out what sport it is that I play, and I am an ice hockey player. By the time this video goes out, I will have already played, so I will insert a nice little after the game picture here. It's a good thing you can't smell it because gear does not improve sitting in a bag for a few years. But my goal is to get this first belt done before I go to that game. So let's go through the list of supplies that you're gonna need and we'll get started. Perhaps the most intimidating part of this is going to be finding the right kind of leather to use. So what I've done is I have linked below a couple of places to get leather from. It may not be the exact side that I'm using, but what I've provided will get you started at a reasonable price. You're also gonna want a ruler or 2 and a long straight edge. So I would recommend maybe just picking up one of these coated meter sticks. You can use a quilting ruler if you want to. That part's not totally necessary. You're also going to need a knife. You can use a box cutter with plenty of extra blades, but I got this one off of Etsy and I'll link it below. Next up, you'll need a mallet. This is a cheap one from Harbor Freight. There is no need to spend money on an expensive mallet. And then after that, you're going to need some sort of stitching punch. The one that I've linked below is my absolute favorite, and it's pretty cheap. And then some wax thread and some needles. You may also want to include an awl, but you can use needles to scratch your leather when you're marking it up. You'll want a lighter and a couple of clips to hold stuff together, and finally some hardware. This is stuff that I've rescued off of bags that I've thrifted, but you can also buy them directly off of Amazon, and again, I'll link it below. One of the most important things to remember about working with leather is to work with a sharp knife. Do not try to force a dull knife through leather. Bad things happen. Don't ask me why I know. I also highly recommend making sure that your work desk is cleared. I don't take my own advice. Ever. When you buy a side of leather, typically you're getting 17 to 24 square feet. So keep that in mind. This is going to be probably 5 feet long. For this first belt, it looks like it's supposed to have some dangly tails once you get it belted around yourself. So I measured my waist and added about 10 inches. So I'm going to end up with a strip of leather that is 46 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide. When cutting into leather, it might surprise you how much force you actually need to use. Don't be afraid to put a little bit of pressure, but if your knife is sharp, it'll work really well. If you find that you have to go over a spot 2 or 3 different times, you need a sharper knife. While I'm cutting out the strip for this first belt, I'm also going to cut out the strips for the second belt and the bag strap. They're all about 3/4 of an inch wide. So while I've got the leather all laid out, I'm going to cut everything at once. Once you get the strip cut out for this first belt, there are really only maybe 3 other steps. The first is to attach the ring. And in order to do that, you just punch a couple of holes with the stitching punch, stitch that ring into place, and then you're going to cut the leather in half, hot dog style, in the last probably 12 inches or so. But once you have those 2 things done, that belt is pretty much finished. Congratulations, you just made a $150 belt in under an hour. For the second belt, I'm using just cheap craft foam to test out the shape and width before cutting it out of leather. Rather than the angled edges, I'm going with a rounded edge. And once I get that set, I test it on myself to make sure it's the width that I like. When I've got it right, I cut it out of my leather and do another fit test to make sure it's exactly what I'm looking for. When I fit test this, I want the ends to just kiss together if I suck in my stomach. Now that I have everything cut out, what I need for this project is the wide strap, the narrow center strap. I need a belt loop, my stitching hole punch, needle and thread, a ring of some sort, this little post thing, a scratch-all, lighter, and a hole punch. I would also recommend a cheap cutting board so that you have something to hammer on. Just like in the first belt, we're going to attach the ring to this one. Same thing, punch a couple of holes, and stitch it in place. That's it. Super simple. The narrow belt has stitching at the top and bottom to keep it from sliding around, so you want to punch some stitching holes close to the edges to keep that narrow belt in place. Once you do that, now we can attach it to the larger belt. I like to punch a couple of anchor holes so that the ring doesn't move farther away from the edge. I don't really know what I'm saying. This is confusing. But anchor it in place once you know where you want that ring to go. That way, all the other stitches will work out. I've created a little belt loop with a scrap of leather and just stitched it together and kind of guesstimated where I wanted it to fall. Again, I put in some anchor stitches and then I try it on to see if that's where I need that belt loop to go. Kind of like with sewing, you just need to try stuff on to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do. But at this point, I'm really happy with what this looks like, and I'm kind of putting a little mark where I think that post thingy should go. And do a little happy dance. For the post, I just poke a hole in the slim belt and pop it in and screw it in place. And then you're gonna stitch up the whole thing so that nothing slides around. This part isn't difficult, it's just time consuming when you're hand sewing. Do the best you can. For the belt holes, I'm using a sample belt that I have as my guide for where those holes should go. But because these holes need to also slip over that post, I'm giving them just a little cut so they can slide into place. I do one final try on just to make sure everything is in the position I want it to be, and then I sew the rest of that slim belt down to the big one. In total, it probably took 3 or 4 hours to make a belt that Anthropologie was selling for 90 bucks. Finally, for the purse, I'm going to start with 2 6.5 by 8.5 inch panels. I also need a 2.5 inch gusset panel and a placket for the zipper. I have a contrasting color, that's optional. I have my little crab claws and the purse strap. I also sewed on the black strip to one of the panels. Now, to make the zipper placket, really you just have to get a strip of leather and cut the center part out wide enough that the zipper can fit. However, I messed something up in this and the final product doesn't look that great, but it's functional enough. I also didn't record any of the sewing of the body panels to the gusset. So while you watch me fiddle with this corner, let me explain kind of how that works. Just use the same measurement from the edge for the body panels as you do for the gusset. So if you punch your stitching holes 1/4 inch in for the body panels, do the same thing for the gusset. Sew it all the way around inside out and attach the end of the gusset to the end of the zipper placket. That makes 100% sense. No, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense to anybody. Once you have everything sewn together, now you have to muscle this bag right side out. Trim your nails, take off all pointy rings, and stretch a little bit because this takes some time and some effort. I think this video is 2.5 times the speed and it still was 3 or 4 minutes long. But once you get this turned right side out and you attach the rings to the strap, you finally get to see the final product. Overall, I'm just so thrilled with how all 3 of these pieces turned out. They're not perfect, but they also didn't cost me $700. And if I wanted to, I can continue trying to make them and even improve upon them. Hopefully in this video, you've seen at least one project you think you could tackle. And maybe it'll spark an interest in leather work that you didn't know you had. If you decide to try one of these, leave me a comment and let me know how it goes. Or if there's something else that you see out there that you'd like to, I don't know, try to make a dupe of, drop me a link. As always, thank you for watching. If you have a minute, subscribe and like the video because it really does help me. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.